Hello, class. My name is Professor Nathan Winkler, PhD. This is Humanities 101. If you need me outside of class hours, you can see me in Chapter Hall. It's room 218, and I'll be there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So anytime outside of class that you'd like to chat, feel free to come by. Today's lecture is titled, "This is Called a Brain." Now, as incoming freshmen, this is the closest you're going to come to one of these this year. And I want to challenge you. Because chances are you've grown up and you've just believed what anybody ever told you. You believe what mom and dad told you. You believe what the media told you. You believe what the government told you. And you've never really taken the chance, really taken the time to think for yourself. So I want to challenge you in that today. How many of you believe that mankind actually put a man on the moon? Raise your hands up high. Anybody that wants to say, no, I don't believe that? You've thought it through and you've decided that didn't happen? No one. Let's see how you feel about it in just a moment. Do you realize that the technology that they had in those days, you have more technology in your pocket right now. Do you realize that the mute button on this phone right here has more technology in it than that lunar lander? And we're supposed to believe that with that kind of technology, we sent a rocket into space off of this massive swirling rock that happens to be spinning out of control through the universe and land on another massive swirling rock that happens to be rotating around this massive floating rock that's spinning around and floating through the universe. With less technology than is in your phone right now in your pocket. It's a little hard to swallow. Have you ever noticed that all the pictures are perfect? Every picture, just look online, say moon landing pictures and look it up in Google. Do you realize, and you'll see hundreds of them, hundreds of perfectly framed, perfectly focused, perfect depth of field pictures. Do you realize those were taken from chest-mounted film cameras with far less technology than the cameras of today? Do you know why all the pictures are perfect? Because they were taken in a studio in the Nevada desert. Hundreds of them. You don't see one out of focus. You don't see one poorly framed. Shot from here. Go home and try that and see how well you do. The shadows are inconsistent. If you'll look at all the pictures, I really do encourage you, get online, Google moon landing pictures. You're going to see shadows that bounce in this direction, in this direction, in this direction. You know what that indicates? That indicates multiple light sources. Do you know what that means? A studio in the Nevada desert. You'll never see stars in the background of any of the pictures. Go look it up yourself. You will never see a star. Now, do you know that there's no atmosphere on the moon, right? You should see countless stars. You see none. Do you know why? It's a studio in the Nevada desert. That's right. You don't see a crater. You don't see, and this thing landed using rocket fuel. Why is there not a blast crater underneath? If you watch pictures of the lander taking off, you'll see no crater. Why is that? I think you should know by now. Here's something really interesting. You guys have seen the videos. There's a waving flag in all the videos. Does anybody have a problem with that? There's no air, there's no atmosphere on the moon, and yet you see this flag doing this. How is that possible? That's an excellent question that you should think about. The temperature extremes on the moon range from 250 degrees Fahrenheit to negative 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're supposed to believe that this aluminum outfit, an aluminum lander, protected them from these extremes. You can survive in Nevada in this outfit, but you cannot survive on the moon. There are micrometeoroids all throughout the universe. These are little tiny fragments of dust from exploding stars or exploding planets or collisions out in space, and they're everywhere. And they're traveling at these kind of speeds, 120,000 miles per hour. We know that if they landed on the moon, they would have been pulverized in moments. Right? These tiny micrometeoroids. Bam, 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 bam. See, you don't get hit by them because our atmosphere protects you. They burn up when they hit the Earth, but there's nothing to protect you on the moon. You could not survive. There was motive to distract. We were going through the Vietnam conflict during that time. Americans were up in arms about it. So they had to come up with something to divert people's attention. They had motive. And finally, this is the most damning evidence of all. We have clearly faked photos, both inside and outside the rockets and the lunar landers. Have any of you seen the video of Neil Armstrong supposedly stepping out onto the moon for the first time? What was the quote? That's right. He mumbled, "One small step for man, but a giant leap for mankind." And most of you have seen that video, right? Supposedly the first man on the moon. Here's my question. Who shot that video? I mean, even if it's all true, he sure wasn't the first man on the moon, right? See, you're so used to seeing reality TV, you don't even think about the fact that there's a cameraman there. And look this up yourself. We have photos from inside the lunar lander, and they're looking through the window at the Earth from space. And it's this big blueberry. And if you look closely, examine it yourself. I'm not afraid for you to study this. Examine it yourself. You will see tape around the edges of the blueberry. They taped a picture of the Earth inside the glass of the lunar lander. Check it out yourself. Don't believe just because someone told you. Learn. And I hate to break it to you, but we never landed on the moon. It was a conspiracy. It was about the Cold War. It was about Vietnam. It was not scientific discovery. This was not Star Trek. So, anybody doubting the moon landing just a little bit now? I mean, you know, maybe you've been indoctrinated that we landed on the moon for so long. You've been taught it. Whether it's true or not, you've believed it firmly. But then when somebody stands up and pounds your theory, bam, 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 it can make you step back and say, I don't know about all this. Can't it? We're going to talk about that today, but let's talk about the moon landing. Just let me give you a little comfort here real quick, okay? The technology level, people, it's called geometry and physics, all right? It really is. The moon rotates around the Earth at the same speed it always has. The Earth rotates at the same speed it always has, or at least there's a micro fraction of a difference over the course of long periods of time, but they know how fast it spins. They know what direction it's going. They know where the moon's going to be at X hour. It's not such a big deal. The technology wasn't necessary. The perfect pictures, now think about this. I'm going to Florida in May, and you know what? I'm going to buy a camera, and I'm going to read the instruction manual on that camera, but when you go to the moon, you figure out how to take good pictures before you leave. They were trained for hour after hour after hour how to take a chest-mounted picture. And they took thousands. You don't go to the moon and take a few snapshots. They went to the moon and took thousands of pictures, and the only ones they post are the good ones. That's why you always see perfect pictures. The shadows are inconsistent because moon rock reflects light. If there was a hill nearby, it would be like another light source, and it would bounce off of it and give different shadows. No stars, that's called depth of field. It's basic photography 101 is that you can either focus on what's in the front or focus on what's in the back, but you can't do both. There's ways you can do it, but in general, with a chest-mounted picture, that's just not going to happen. You figure out where your depth of field is going to be and you use it, and they wanted to illuminate what we wanted to see, the flags, which brings us to number 6 in a moment, lack of a crater. That's because the moon's surface is made of rock. We think of the moon's surface as being made of dust, and there's a layer of dust about this thick on it, which you see footprints and that sort of thing, but it's rock, and it would not blast a crater as it landed or it took off. The waving flag is because they knew there was no atmosphere, and so what they did is they ran a wire through the top of the flag, and when they planted it in the ground, they rotated it like this so that it sat there doing this for the videos because they thought this looked dumb. Temperature extremes, the temperature extremes are on the surface. There's no atmosphere in the moon, so there's not this atmosphere that can bake you or freeze you, all right? Instead, they had to protect their feet, so they have these big, thick boots that you see them in. And they also landed in places where the sun would be shining. They didn't land on the dark side of the moon. They landed on the light side of the moon, so they wouldn't experience the vast negative temperatures. The micrometeoroids are no problem. Their suits were made of Kevlar. They'd bounce off, no worries. Motive to distract. If the rest of them line up, it really doesn't matter what a motive would be. And the clearly faked photos, the way Neil Armstrong's picture was taken, the video was taken, is because the lunar lander had an arm that came out like this and rotated around with a video camera on it and took the small step for man, giant leap for mankind. The faked picture in the lunar lander of the blueberry taped to the window, this is real. You can look it up yourself. But it was taken in training exercises long before they ever left for space. So it's out there. You can see it, but it isn't what people make it out to be. Now, once you've heard the other evidence, then you kind of go, I can go back to my moon landing self. Right? Let's try something a little harder. Professor Nathan Winkler, Humanities 101, welcome. This is called a brain. Does anybody have a problem with this statement? I mean, if you're in here and you're a believer, you've based your life on this nonsense. This defies the law of non-contradiction, one of the most fundamental laws of logic. Someone cannot be their own father, and yes, this is what you believe about Jesus. I have a hard time with that, but it shouldn't surprise you because you follow a book that has all kinds of fairy tales in it. Doesn't your book teach that a man was supernaturally strong and he tore the jawbone out of a donkey and he killed thousands of soldiers with that because his hair was long? Does anybody have a problem with this? Does this not sound like a fairy tale? And yet your book is chock full of fairy tales like the fish that swallowed the man and he survived in the belly for 3 days. Spit him up on a beach somewhere. He went on to preach the goodness of the Lord. Come on. I know Mom and Dad have always said it was true. I know Sunday school teachers taught you it was true. But isn't that a hard pill to swallow? Pardon the pun. Your religion is founded on people talking to a talking snake. Adam and Eve, who DNA studies have now shown could never have existed, the earliest humans were easily separated by 50,000 years, the male and the female, and the entire human species did not come from one select pair. And yet you base your life on this stuff. You also believe that all the animals in the world converged on one spot and climbed in a boat and floated around for 40 days. Don't you think if you have an open mind at all, you'd have to question that and say, is that possibly true? And yet chances are you go through every day just not even examining it, not even wondering. And so I'm not here to hurt you. I want to help you so that you can see clearly for the first time. But your idea that a dead man came back to life from death is just as fairy tale. There's no difference between your Jesus, Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. I know it's not something you want to hear, but for you to see reality, it's important I tell you. And it comes from a book that's chock full of contradictions. Your Bible contains contradiction after contradiction, like this one, for example. John, the supposed friend of Jesus, says, "No man hath seen God at any time." And yet in Genesis, Jacob, one of the patriarchs of the faith, says, "I have seen God face to face." This is obviously a contradiction, right? How can you say it's a holy book? How can you say it was inspired by God? It's filled with mistakes. Wonderful example of a mistake. Jesus himself, according to Mark, said these words. He talks about David, and he entered the house of God when Abiathar was the high priest. But in 1 Samuel, if you go back to the Old Testament and read the original story, it says David went to Nob to Ahimelech the priest. Maybe it's a minor detail, but somebody was wrong. Either Jesus got it wrong when he said it, or Mark got it wrong when he recorded it. But somebody got it wrong. Filled with mistakes. And it's filled with downright fraud. It's filled with people trying to pull the wool over your eyes, and here's an example of that. Matthew, one of the Gospels, says these words. He says, "And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets." Notice those words, spoken by the prophets. "He shall be called a Nazarene." So he's quoting the Old Testament prophets, saying, and he does this many times in his gospel, saying Jesus fulfilled this prophecy and this prophecy and this prophecy. But here's the issue with this one. This statement is recorded nowhere in the Old Testament. Study it yourself. There's no prophet anywhere that says the Messiah will be from Nazareth. And yet Matthew, trying to twist arms and trying to make his case, acts like someone somewhere said it. He just got it wrong. It's outright fraud, but it shouldn't surprise you either, because you You come from a religion with a long line of liars. Here's what one of your popes said. Pope Leo X said this. He said, how well we know what a profitable superstition this fable of Christ has been for us. One of the popes says, we know this story's fake, but cha-ching, we're cashing in. One of the early church fathers, Eusebius, said it like this, and maybe the Pope took a lesson from him. He says, it's an act of virtue to deceive and lie when by such means the interests of the church might be promoted. One of the people that you guys look to for orthodoxy, one of the people you look back to find out what you ought to believe, the early church fathers, says, hey, it's cool to lie as long as you promote the church. How can we possibly think we know anything 2,000 years later? 1,800 years later. Who knows how many liars there have been down through the centuries, willing to lie so that you would believe, you would give your money, so preachers and priests could have a comfortable life. I know it's hard to swallow. I'm going to read about it. I'm going to tell you about somebody, and I want you to try to figure out who I'm talking about here. This person was born of a virgin in a cave on December 25th. This person's birth was attended by shepherds. He was a great traveling teacher. He had 12 companions they called disciples, sacrificed himself for world peace. He was buried in a tomb, alive 3 days later, called the Good Shepherd, both the Lion and the Lamb, and he was celebrated on Sunday, the Lord's Day. Who am I talking about? You'd like to think I'm talking about Jesus, but I'm not. I'm talking about the ancient god Mithra, from Mithraism. Read about it yourself, Mithraism. Mithraism predates Christianity by at least 300 years. And the god Mithra had all those characteristics. Isn't it obvious that Christianity borrowed some of their facts from elsewhere? Your own Apostle Paul, if he was sitting outside the church today, you would have walked past him and turned up your nose and thought, there's a lunatic at the church today. He said this about himself. He says, we are fools, weak, dishonored. We go hungry and thirsty and we are in rags. Brutally treated, we're homeless. We have become the scum of the earth, the garbage of the world. Some homeless dude wrote your Gospels, wrote the epistles that you rely on. The earliest known records of Christianity was written by some crazy homeless guy. What do you do with that? Your Gospel sprung out of his teaching. And finally, one of my interns ruined my presentation here. I don't know what to do about that. But finally, here's the thing about Christianity. It just doesn't work. It just flat doesn't work. It doesn't do what it says it will do. Jesus went around saying things like, if you'll believe, or he'll say, pray and ask. And if you ask anything from me, it will be done for you. I want you to imagine up here on stage with me right now is a little boy from Cambodia who had his arms and legs blown off from stepping on a landmine. It happens all the time over there. Your God watches while people step on landmines and have their limbs blown off. But he's up here today, and he says, can you do anything for me? We can gather the most faithful among you and bring you up here and say, hey, let's pray. Let's put your hands on this kid, and let's pray that those legs grow back and those arms grow back. Do any of you believe it will happen? Your Jesus said, just ask and I'll do it for you. You see, you don't even believe. You say you believe, but you don't believe. Here's what you believe about prayer. You believe that if you'll pray and if you'll ask, God is going to say one of three things. He's going to say yes. So you say, hey, God, I could sure use $10,000. So you pray, God, please give me $10,000. And next week in the mail, unexpectedly, the IRS sends you a return check, says, hey, you overpaid on your taxes 4 years ago. Whoa, all of a sudden, God answered my prayer. He said yes. But then, what if the check never comes? You're praying, I need 10 grand, I need 10 grand, I need 10 grand. Then you say, oh, well, God said no. And so he must have a higher purpose. He must know something I don't know, so I'll trust him when he says no. Or sometimes God says later. He says, oh yeah, maybe I'll do something for you later. So a few months from now, you get this job opportunity, and you get a big promotion, and 10 grand. Woo! God answered my prayer. He just took his time doing it. How is that any different from me praying to my milk jug? I pray, oh, great milk jug, please get me a job. I need a great job. Somebody calls me the next day, says, hey, I got this job for you. I say, woo, the milk jug answered my prayers. But weeks go by and I don't have a job. Then I say, oh, the milk jug must have decided in his grand design, his sovereignty, and his wisdom that I don't deserve a job right now. Or a few months pass and then the job appears. I say, hey, the milk jug is good. Praise the milk jug. How is it any different? It's a crapshoot. It doesn't work, people. Christianity is a sinking ship. Educated people are no longer embracing it. I encourage you, get in a lifeboat, get out while you can. Your parents aren't going to like me, your priest isn't going to like me, but at least you will be thinking for yourself. How we doing? You guys in Love and Daylight Church, aren't you? Now here's what you want me to do. You want me to go through that whole list and fix it. I'm not going to do it. We want to teach you to think accurately about these things, not to just get hammered, but to be able to find answers. I'm not afraid of everything I just presented to you. Now there's some of them that still stymie me a little bit, I'll be honest about that, but none of that stuff terrifies me anymore because I've studied. I've done my homework. I've worked hard to figure out why do I believe this and why do I believe that. But here's how most Christians, if I let you, most of you would do this after that presentation. That's what you'd do. You'd go home and whistling zippity-doo-dah and, oh, let's just go on our way and pretend we never heard it. And you would. Let's face it. And you'd never grow. You'd never think about these things. There's two reasons you ought to study this stuff. We shared this in a past sermon, but C.S. Lewis said, the heart cannot rejoice in what the mind rejects as false. So let's pretend that I never took the glasses off. I just gave you that negative presentation, and then I stood up here and I took the glasses off and I said, okay, guys, who's ready to come and follow Jesus today? It's going to be hard to get a stampede of people rushing down here saying, oh, let me turn to Jesus, when you've just been hammered with intellectual doubts. Hammered. It's hard for you to stand during a worship session of music and where some people are crying and raising their hands and trying to connect with God if in the back of your mind you're thinking, why did my son die? Why did this terrible thing happen to my neighbor? Where is God? If you've got intellectual objections, it's hard for your heart to embrace. Jesus said, love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The mind is a part of it. So it helps you to study this stuff. It helps you to learn answers to objections. The second thing it does is it equips you. John Stott said this. He said, we cannot pander to man's intellectual arrogance, but we must cater to his intellectual integrity. Peter, Jesus' kind of his right-hand man, he said in one of his epistles, he said, always be ready to give the reason for the hope that's within you. He says, but do so with gentleness and respect. He says, you ought to be prepared. When somebody says, why should I believe this stuff? You ought to say, well, here's 5 reasons why I think. Or here's something that you probably haven't considered. He said, you ought to be prepared. I did this presentation, actually, at a fundraiser for an apologetics organization a couple years ago. And, I don't know, there were probably 200 people in the room, big banquet. And I had invited a friend of mine who's an atheist. He calls himself a strong atheist, which means he knows why he's an atheist. And he's a real good buddy of mine. I love this guy. We spent a lot of time chatting, getting to know what's your view, here's my view, going back and forth. But he was at the table with me, and we were chatting with the people around us, and some of them knew that I was the keynote speaker of the night. And one of them turned to my buddy and started a conversation with him, and it was going along quite nicely. And then the guy asked my buddy a question, and Abe said, well, I'm an atheist, so I believe this. And you could see it happen on the guy's face. He was terrified. An atheist infiltrated us. And I'm not joking. 45 seconds later, the guy ended the conversation with Abe, literally turned backwards in his seat, turned his back to my buddy, and started chatting with his wife. Now, I'm not sure I blame him completely. Really, Abe's an intellectual atheist. He intimidates people. But do you see, if the guy was solid in what he believed and why he believed it, there'd be no need to be terrified. It will help you engage others. Shouldn't we be just as people, engaging other people, loving other people, connecting with other people? And when you're afraid of this stuff, I've asked people in conferences, why don't you talk about Jesus with people more often than you do? Why don't you share the gospel more? And they say, because I'm afraid. What are you afraid of? I'm afraid of looking stupid. It's the number one answer I get. When you know why you believe, you don't have to be afraid, and you can approach people and talk with confidence. So my encouragement to you is start here in the library. And I don't necessarily mean a physical library, but just decide that when you hear questions, when you hear me stand up and bash the contradictions in the Bible, or bash this or bash that, or you read it online, don't skip it. Don't bury your head in the sand, but instead embrace it. Say, I'm going to learn something today, and check it out. Start searching, start studying. And as you do that, you're going to peel back the onion. You guys have had one of these probably, or seen one of these at some point. You get to the middle's the best part. The outside's pretty good, but it gets better as you go in. And Christianity is like this. If I wanted to, I could stand up here as an atheist and bash you guys' faith. And then as the Christian, I could bash what the atheist said. And then I could go back and act like the atheist and bash what the Christian just said. And I could probably do it 3, 4, 5 layers deep because I've studied. And if you'll study and learn, you're going to learn that there is complexity. There is difficulty. There are apparent contradictions. But you're going to learn how to think through those things. And as you learn how to think through them, you're going to recognize smelly dead fish. Anybody know what a red herring argument is? You might know. I'm not asking for a show of hands. But a red herring argument is an argument or a story or something like that designed to distract you. And it comes from a story from the old days where a thief was evading the police. And he's running from the police. And the police have dogs. And they're chasing him through the woods. And he comes to a village. And when he comes to the village, he runs into the fish market. And he overthrows a big thing of fish. And he grabs some fish and he starts dropping them all the way as he runs. And he starts rubbing them on the ground. And he runs all the way to the river, dropping these fish. And then he backtracks across the fish and vanishes into the woods. And guess where the dogs go? Dogs go straight to the river. Bam, they're chasing the fish. And that's what happens with a red herring argument, is they put something in front of you intended to take your eyes off what really is important. And here's one of those examples from my presentation. Now this was a tough one, because I was attacking prayer. But do you see that in attacking prayer and in attacking how God answers prayer, I'm not attacking the foundational truths of Christianity, am I? I'm attacking a certain view of things or a certain portion or part of Christianity. But I'm not attacking the virgin birth here. I'm not attacking Jesus and the resurrection. I'm not attacking repentance and life transformation and new life in Jesus, the foundational truths, the Nicene Creed truths, the Apostle Creed truths. I'm not attacking those. But what I'm trying to do is blow up something real ugly and real smelly and real hard to deal with and skirt the main issues. This is a great thing that we could talk about someday. Does God heal amputees? Is it any different from praying to your milk jug? And I'm not going to talk about that today. I think you start reading online about it. But do you see what it is? It's a red herring argument. It's trying to pull you away from Christianity when what it's really doing is just kind of shaping your view of Christianity or your view of prayer. And then you need to recognize cherry picking. Cherry picking is this idea that you can go into anything and you can pull out what you want out of it and twist that and make it appear to be something it isn't. And here's in that presentation where that happened, was in the life of Paul. I said he's a homeless, crazy guy, right? But what I'm doing is I'm picking out one thing that Paul said in one place, completely out of context, and I'm making it say something it never was intended to say. So here, there are authors who are doing the circuits on this passage of Scripture, saying Paul was a maniac, he was a lunatic. Paul said it himself. But do you see that if you embrace that Paul said this himself, then you have to find out, what did he say right before that? And what did he say right after that? Because if you're going to say you believe this, you got no grounds to say you don't believe what came right before it and right after it, and yet they skirt those issues. And if you read what comes before it and after it, you're going to see a resurrected dead man. You're going to see a guy whose life was transformed and changed because he encountered this Jesus. But when people cherry pick, they take out what they want and they leave the rest behind. And you'll start to recognize that as you do your homework. You also recognize a subject called equivocation. This just means that words have different meanings. It's kind of a basic law of communication and language. A lot of times, if people use equivocation, it can really mess up your head. And here's an example. Feathers are light. Do we all agree with that? In general, relative to other things, we would say yes, feathers are light. Would we also agree with this sentence, that light dispels darkness? Right? So then can we say that therefore feathers dispel darkness? No. Why? Because the word light has different meanings. Just like in these passages that he said were contradictions. No man hath seen God at any time. Jacob says, I have seen God face to face. Which word do you think was equivocated? Seen. They just must have meant something different. This is not a big deal. But when you're getting hammered, boo, 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 here's where you're wrong, this is where it's bad. That just seems like one other thing to stack up on top of everything. But when you're educated in defending the faith, using logic and thinking things through, you see this and you're thinking, man, you're just not doing it, man. I'm sorry. But if I presented it a while ago, chances are we went right past this slide and you're going, well, what about that? You got to the next slide, you went, oh, what about that? Oh, man, what about that? This is one that you could just easily bypass. And then I encourage you to investigate. We talked about this quote from Eusebius. Now this is awful, isn't it? I mean, really, how do we get past this? Here's how we get past it. He never said it. It was never said. And yet, if you look around online, just type in some of these words into Google. He's quoted everywhere as to have had say. Oh my gosh. He's quoted everywhere as saying this quote. And here's what happened. Some Joe put it on a blog post somewhere, and then his uncle, who also blogs, put it on his blog post, and then somebody quoted him, and then somebody quoted him, and then his best friend's sister's cousin's former roommate quoted him, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere. He never said it. It was never said. But here's a problem. Pope Leo X did actually say this. He really did say these words, how well we know what a profitable superstition this fable of Christ has been for us. Here's the problem. He said it in a work of fiction. There was an apostate guy in the church, his name was John Bale, and he wrote this play called The Pageant of Popes, basically to bash the Catholic Church. So he puts on this big production, and in that play, Pope Leo X says these words. That's like saying Abraham Lincoln said, "Party on, dudes," because he said it in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And yet, you'll see him quoted everywhere. And all you got to do is a little homework to find out that those things were never said. But if somebody just throws it out at you and says, this was said, and this was said, this long series of liars has propagated Christianity, you go, don't do that. Don't panic. Never panic. It's going to be okay. Go home and investigate and ask them this amazing question. Not that question. This question. That was another fantastic moment in my presentation. I loved that. Where do you get your information? Somebody says, well, Eusebius said this. Really? Can you send me to the source? In which of his books did he say it? Pope Leo X said this. Really? Where do you, and you're not trying to be obnoxious. You're just saying, where does that come from? I'd really like to know. And like Mithraism, like I was talking about, I was in a little coffee shop in Boulder, Colorado, and the newspaper headline read, Jesus was a copycat. And it listed all these facts. Born of a virgin, December 25th. Disciples, dead, buried, 3 days later arose. And it's talking about Mithraism. And you'll see this all over online. Ancient pagan religions that Christianity stole from. The truth about this list is no, never happened. Never was. The scholars of Mithraism now admit we don't know much about it. We know he was born from a bull, or a rock. He was born from a rock and he sacrificed bulls, and that's about it. That's about all we know about Mithraism. And yet opponents of Christianity somewhere, somehow, posted on some blog somewhere that this was a list that described Mithra. If you just did a little homework, if you just said, where do you get your information, you'd find out it's just not true. But it doesn't make it any easier when it's going on. What is this a puzzle of? Toys. Are you sure? Are you positive? Not after this presentation, right? No. I feel like you can be pretty confident that this is a puzzle of Toy Story. But do you see that you don't have to have every single piece in place to see the big picture? You don't have to know the answer to everything I did in my presentation to say there might be something to this Christianity. If you can get certain pieces in place, even in this puzzle, you could probably eliminate another fourth of the puzzle and still. Man, if you just had Woody's face in the corner, I could say, what's this a puzzle of? Well, it's probably Toy Story, right? And the more pieces you put into the puzzle, the more clear it becomes. And after so long, you can just step back in confidence and say, I don't have every piece. One of the pieces is even missing. I mean, it went under the table and the dog ate it, and who knows where it is in the yard at this point. I'm never going to be able to finish this puzzle. And you'll never finish Christianity. You'll never be able to say 100% certainty, like mathematical certainty, I know that Christianity is true. If you're saying it, you're equivocating. You mean something different than know. You don't know. You can have confidence in it. You can place your trust in it, but you always have to do that with a few pieces missing. No worldview ever has any other rule. There's no atheist that can say, I know that I know. There's no Buddhist that can say, I know that I know. People don't know that they know. And yet you can pull together all the pieces and put them together in such a way where you can say, yeah, but this makes sense. This is something I can follow. So my encouragement to you, and what we're going to tackle in the next few months, or next few weeks, is this idea, is to find a hill worth dying on. Any of you that have studied military history will have heard of the island of Iwo Jima. And Iwo Jima was a pivotal island for the U.S. forces to occupy during the war. And the reason was that on Iwo Jima was an airport where jets could take off. And away from Iwo Jima was this other little island called Saipan. And the American forces, the Allied forces, had already occupied Saipan. And Saipan had like a place where bombers could take off, but it wasn't equipped for jet fighters to take off. And so we couldn't attack mainland Japan because between Saipan and mainland Japan was Iwo Jima. So we've got bombers that want to make it, but they can't because there's a hornet's nest of jets in the air taking off from Iwo Jima all the time. We had to take Iwo Jima. And that's where this picture was taken. Here's the difficulty with Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima is an island about this long, depending on your map. And on this side is a flat space where there's an airport. On this side is a tall mountain. So you've got this tall mountain with soldiers embedded like ticks in it, defending this flat airport over here. Very, very hard to take. And yet we did. We landed on the beach. Soldiers swarmed that mountain. Many, many people gave up their lives. But they eventually planted this flag on top of that mountain. It's one of the most historic pictures of all time. Within days, the war turned. It changed. Bam, bam, bam. Now we had free access to mainland Japan. It was just days before full surrender. But you see, this was a hill worth dying on. Who knows how much longer the war would have gone on if those men didn't courageously, bravely storm this mountain. And when it comes to Christianity and when it comes to your belief system and why you believe what you believe, my suggestion to you is find out what is that strategic piece that if that thing is solid, if I take that island and that I believe it and it's ingrained in me and I'm confident of it, that I'll win this war over doubt, that I'll win these battles that go on in my head. What do I really need to know? And this is my hill worth dying on, and it's the character of Jesus Christ. That's what you're going to see at Daylight Church. Man, we believe He was it. He was the light of the world. He's the light in daylight. We believe that 2,000 years ago, 1,984 years ago, or however many, He started a public ministry. And He taught people the kingdom of God is here. He taught people that something's about to change, that God is revealing Himself to mankind through me. We believe He died, and we believe 3 days later He did come back to life. We also believe that resurrection, that new start, that new beginning from death to life is available to you. We believe that's what God was doing. He was planting this flag in the soil for everyone to see that says, here's where dead people rise. Here's where hurting people find comfort. Here's where people that are destroyed are rebuilt. It's Jesus. Bam, that flag was planted. And that's the hill worth dying on. I don't know all the answers to Ahimelech versus Abimelech and who was the priest at such and such. And I've read up on all that and I know what the theories are. And that one in particular, I haven't solved that one. I don't know. I'm kind of suspending judgment on that one. There's a lot of other things I'm suspending judgment on. There's a lot of pieces in the puzzle that I'm allowing to sit outside that I haven't quite figured out yet. But here's what I've found out is I've seen Jesus. I've seen what He has done for me. I've seen what He's done in people's lives. I've seen the history behind it. I've seen how the whole story, the unfolding narrative from beginning Genesis to the end Revelation, it all makes sense when Jesus is concerned. I've seen that what He did on the cross is the most pivotal moment in all of human history. That every hospital, virtually every hospital, every school, every higher education learning center, all these places, that cannibalism has practically been wiped from the globe because of this flag Jesus that was planted. I've seen that he's the central figure of all history. That's what we hang our hat on. It's not going to be how old is the earth. It's not going to be should you be sprinkled or dunked when you're baptized. It's not going to be all these different questions people have about how sovereign is God? Do we really have free will, or is he up there commanding every little detail of our lives? That's not where we hang our hat. We hang our hat on the fact that Jesus Christ brought resurrection life to mankind, and that he'll do it for you.